Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Ask Tailosive. But before we get into the questions, I think we have to address yesterday's video. The amount of dislikes and the amount of disagreement and controversy we're having. I know it's probably having a huge toll on the channel. We're doing fine? Subs are still going up. Okay, never mind then. We'll keep it up. We'll keep this going. Anyway, moving to questions. Matteo says, will the rumored 6.1-inch LCD iPhone have a chin since the display can't fold underneath itself? This is actually a concerning question. The only reason the iPhone X has the same size bezel all the way around is because it's an OLED display, and OLED displays can be curved. In fact, every iPhone X at the bottom has a curved display, so the ribbon, as in the part of the display that attaches to the circuit board, is on the back of the iPhone X. This rumored LCD iPhone means that that display won't be able to be curved under. This is why a lot of people are theorizing that the new LCD budget iPhone will look more like kind of a Pixel 2 Android looking phone. I really hope they don't do that because I think it would confuse the market too much. For one, it would mean developers would have to adapt to a new aspect ratio, a new pixel per inch, and on top of that, a new version of their apps that doesn't have a notch in them, while still having to adapt to the 10 and the 10 Plus later this year. So my hope is that either this budget LCD iPhone isn't happening at all, and maybe there's just a budget iPhone that still has an OLED display and has the same size bezel all the way around, or if there is going to be a budget iPhone, it's going to have Face ID, but retain the look of a typical iPhone 8 or 8 Plus. That way developers don't get as confused, consumers don't get as confused, but again, we don't know. We might have that really confusing lineup where we have the taller display, but still has a chin at the bottom. It's gonna be interesting to see how it works out. Efe says, what is your favorite wallpaper that is made by Apple? Definitely the 3 different default dynamic wallpapers you get with the iPhone X. Those, the way they move when you 3D press on them, are really, really cool, and it's also just nice that they're an exclusive to the 10 model. Like, you can't really get those on here unless you do some extra work, but they look really, really cool. But also, credit needs to go towards the new wallpaper you get if you update to the beta. iOS 11.4 Beta 2, you get this exclusive iPhone 8 wallpaper that also looks really good on the 10 and gets rid of your notch, which is kind of neat. Is it possible for apps and iPhones to keep listening in the background and show ads based on that? You're thinking of Android. If an iOS app is using the microphone in the background, it would put a red bar on the top of your phone, or if you have a 10, it would put a red circle around the time icon. Apple's very locked down about apps breaching privacy protocol, meaning using the microphone when the app is being closed, or, like recently, I got this little tracker thing to put on my new set of keys since I recently lost my keys. If you have that app running in the background, it of course is keeping track of where I am at all times, and it notified me of that. I was walking around town and then I got a notification that says the tracking app is using your location in the background. Are you okay with this? Because I don't want to lose my keys, I hit yes, go ahead and keep using my location. But if an app that wasn't supposed to be using my location was, I still would have been notified about that. And usually if an app does do something it's not supposed to do, Apple's typically gonna catch it before it gets to the App Store. But if they don't, the user would still see it. Aiden says, thoughts on disappointing HomePod sales? I mean, even people who bought the HomePod aren't really surprised by that. It's a very expensively priced speaker, a very good one, but even people who like the HomePod, even Apple sheep out there, can't really justify that price and that amount of sound. Most of my friends who like Apple but don't have a HomePod will say, I live at home or I live in a small room, a HomePod like that really wouldn't be very useful to me. I don't need that much sound quality, or I just use headphones anyway. And on top of that, the Google Home Max is not selling very well either, meaning that Apple kind of started the smart speaker market in the very premium, good sound quality but high price standard, which I don't think there's a huge demand for. So it's not very surprising to me that the HomePod's not selling very well, but I mean, I'm sure the Google Home Mini and the Amazon Echo, they sell a lot better, but they also make a lot less per unit, especially when they go on sale. And the Google Home Mini for a long time was basically costing $5 to $30. Profit margin is not very high on that. Whereas on the HomePod, I'm sure each unit is a much higher profit than it would be for a Google Home Mini. But I think this definitely points to the idea that hopefully this June we'll get a more budget-friendly HomePod, which I'd definitely be interested in as well. Trusted says, if you could only choose 3 Apple products to save from being destroyed, which ones would you choose? We're just talking about my consumer life. I would probably just stick with Apple Watch, phone, and AirPods. But this reminds me, if I throw my iMac Pro into a volcano, Apple won't fix it, so I better keep the iMac Pro, right? Saving that one from being destroyed because it's irreplaceable, especially when you don't get Apple Care. Tyler says, do you think Tesla and Apple might collaborate on a product in the future? Well, I really want that to happen. It doesn't sound like it because Apple kind of experiments with, CarPlay, and Tesla has their own OS that runs on their cars' dashboards and everything. While I really want that to happen, it doesn't seem like something that would. I feel like Apple's more likely to be working on their own car projects via software or potentially hardware in the future. We'll see. But my guess is those companies, while really, really cool, and I'm a big fan of both, are likely going to stay in their own lanes. No pun intended. The tech person says, what is your least favorite Apple product from recent Apple, 2012 and onward? You know, there's not really an Apple product in the last 6 years that I can be like, that one was just garbage and I hated it. There are just a couple that I'm just not really a fan of and I don't really think need to exist. For one, the 2013 Mac Pro, the trash can one, just felt like it couldn't really make anyone happy. And also in more recent years, the new 2018 iPad. While being budget, I really think people would just be better off getting the 2016 iPad Pro. And if you want a cheap iPad, then get the 2017 cheaper iPad. I feel like buying a budget iPad whose sole new feature is spending another $100 on a stylus is just hypocritical. Budget, but $99 on a stylus, no laminated display, no stereo speakers. I think more people would just care if they got the 2016 iPad Pro. Those features would be more noticeable, even if the CPU is just a tiny bit slower, because if you're looking for a budget iPad, you're likely not exporting a lot of videos on it. And even on that 2016 iPad Pro, you're going to be getting iOS updates for easily the next 3 to 4 years. Just don't really think it needs to be there. Justin says, we know your thoughts on Apple advertising, but what are your thoughts on Samsung ads? Personally, I think they're extremely effective. I don't think they're right, but I think they're really good at advertising. Like that growing up ad. I still get comments on that every single day. That's a very effective ad because Samsung within about a minute can convince people who like iPhones that they no longer like iPhones anymore. Samsung's ads are good at persuading people, and I think that's what advertising's supposed to be. Convincing someone to buy your product. Whereas I think a lot of Apple's advertising is just reminding people that they exist, and I don't know how much that helps. Garrett says, what was the deciding factor for you to become a full-time YouTuber? Why did you choose that type of job over others? I always wanted to do stuff with videos and film. I originally wanted to go to a film school in Southern California, but I had many friends and family go to that industry, and I noticed that when they went to film school, they almost never made films. They were always working on other people's projects or trying to satisfy some other guy's vision. What I liked about YouTube was I could retain control over my content. I got to decide what I wanted to make. Even if I had less resources, I would still get to decide what I was working on, and things would be about my vision, not trying to suffice some other guy's vision. And I decided to pull the trigger on my YouTube career and quit my job when I was able to make enough off of YouTube to sustain myself fully. And that wasn't through ad reads. That was just purely on people watching my content and enjoying it, people super chatting, people on Patreon. I did YouTube for part-time for about a year while I worked at a mandarin ranch, and then YouTube was starting to take off quite a bit, and I was making enough off of it, and I said, you know what? I think I'm ready to go full-time, man. I've yet to be full-time for a year. I've been doing this full-time for 10 months now, and thanks to you guys, I think it's going pretty well. Delvin says, guess the price of the base model 10.5-inch iPad Pro for this year. Face ID seems to make things more expensive, so I'm gonna go a little higher and say that probably the new iPad Pro this year is gonna start around $700 instead of $600. I think it's gonna be more expensive to manufacture, and there's gonna be some more premium specs in it. So yeah, the iPad Pros this year's are really going to be Pro. Michael says, do you think the iPad Pro refresh this June will keep the 10.5 inches footprint? That is an excellent question. If we are switching to the same size bezel on this year's iPad, does that mean the aspect ratio is changing or the footprint of the iPad is changing? Personally, I think for the sake of developers, Apple is going to keep the aspect ratio, meaning that iPads right now are 4:3. They're going to continue to be, meaning that this new iPad Pro in June is actually going to change the footprint. As in, the chin and forehead of your iPad Pro will just be scaled down, and the display will stay the same size, of course, with the added curved corners, which means you're gonna have to buy a whole new set of smart covers. They'll probably have to make a whole new smart keyboard, but they are going to look really, really cool. So I'm likely gonna sell my 10.5-inch iPad Pro when I get my new one, and I'll definitely include the smart cover with it. Kiss says, what do you think about the Facebook situation right now? Do you think that someday we will have to pay to use Facebook? Facebook seems like a giant mess right now, but personally, I'm just surprised that people are shocked to find out that Facebook sold user data. I just kind of thought that was a given. When you sign up for a free service, you are the product. I'm not saying that's okay. I'm just saying I thought that was the sacrifice everyone knew they were making when they signed up for free programs. And Facebook's not the only one doing this. Microsoft does it with Windows 10. Google does it with Gmail, Google Photos. They can access all that stuff, and they can even sell your personal data to different companies. So I was just kind of confused why everyone was shocked that Facebook was doing it as well. But if Facebook expects people to keep using it, they better not start charging for it, because if they did, to me, that's basically the nail in the coffin. There was already a lack of interest in Facebook in the first place. In the last couple years, Facebook has turned into more of a place for middle-aged adults and older people, and personally in my life, I'm seeing all the youth leave Facebook because they don't want to post pictures that their parents can comment on. So that's what made everyone switch to Instagram and Snapchat. They don't want their parents looking at their posts. So Facebook on top of that started charging money for it. Yeah, that would be like, now there's literally no reason to use Facebook. It's completely useless. It's already kind of stupid. There's just not that many people using it. He also sent this picture to me, Tailosive Tech Edition iPhone, which is a really cool concept. concept that luckily I found the creator for. People were posting this really cool looking phone all over Instagram and they kept saying source unknown. So I did some searching and the creator of this really cool concept is Apple Insane. He's on Instagram, you can check him out, and he does several different colored iPhones that look really, really cool. So guys, don't just steal pictures and repost them without crediting. That happens to me a lot on Instagram and it bugs me when people just take my pictures and post them as their own. So try not to do that. Do you think that the Apple Watch will fall into obscurity if there isn't a major refresh this year? See, the Apple Watch Series 3 did sell really well, and I think part of that was the cellular option. So if they don't do kind of a major redesign of the Apple Watch, I'm imagining this year's won't sell super well. If they are able to make it look really cool and design changes a lot, then I think it will also be a hit, just like last year. Do you think that you would add another Tailosive channel, maybe Tailosive Automotive? We're not gonna make any more channels until we can get consistent content across all of them. That's kind of the goal for this year, is to start posting regular content across the entire network, but we're not there yet, so no point in adding more channels. And also, I don't know much about cars, so there would be no point to automotive. But that wraps it up for this week's episode. Thank you guys for all your questions. Please follow me on Twitter so that you can get notified when we're doing another one of these. This is your Apple Shape here, and I will see you in the next one.